we're so excited and delighted to have New York Times bestselling author Kristin Hannah with us with her latest hit, which we already have decided, Kristin, it's the best book of the year, The Women. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much. It's so nice to see you guys.
Oh,
I know we've never seen you in person because we're doing this so that people can enjoy this interview. Because I don't know if this is like maybe the fifth time we've talked to you about one of your books, but it's so fun to see your face.
Well, thank you. You too. Yeah, I always look forward to talking to you guys.
Oh, your
Okay.
book, The Women,
This book-
unbelievable.
this is everything. Lori said we're calling it the best book of the year. We both read it in a day. It's a big one, but it is. Kristin, you are so magical with words, and you've told us a part of history that none of us knew about. And can you give us kind of the setup, or what made you? Let's start with what made you even want to write this story.
Well, I first pitched the idea of a Vietnam era story in 1997 to my editor. And she basically said, you know what, you're not ready. You aren't good enough. The world doesn't want to hear about Vietnam right now. Think about this and come back when it's the exact right moment. And I knew that she was right on all counts. So I sort of shelved this idea. And I think the reason that it was so important to me was I was a kid during the Vietnam era, and it cast a huge shadow over my childhood. One of my best girlfriend's dad was a pilot who was shot down and missing in action. And so back then we wore these prisoner of war bracelets.
Yes.
For bracelets, right?
Yeah.
And so, here I had his name and the day that he was lost on my wrist for years and years and years. And so I just was always thinking about it. And then, of course, for those of us who lived through this on any level, we remember what it was like when the vets came home. And it was just a really, difficult, contentious time in American history. And so I've been wanting, to write this story forever. And in March of 20, so I had just finished my previous book, The Four Winds, and turned it in. And I was watching the news, and we were in COVID lockdown. And so we're, isolated and tense and, feeling weird. And America was just chaos,
Very much.
anger and division. And I thought to myself, boy, this feels like the Vietnam era again. And then I was watching, our nurses on the front line of the pandemic and how exhausted and overworked and how courageous they were being on all of our behalf, right? And so it just struck me, okay, this is the moment. Vietnam feels relevant again. It feels like that era has something to say to us. And so I just started writing.
We're so glad you did.
I can't
Oh my
stand it how
gosh.
good this is. We've made everyone, read it around the office. I'm like, you have 2 days. You got to return it. Get it.
Yeah,
it in.
because the book isn't out yet. It's
It
out
isn't
not till
out.
next Tuesday.
I know the book. If you're just joining us, we're with Kristin Hannah, New York Times bestselling author, The Nightingale, Firefly Lane, amongst many, many others. And her latest book is The Women. Kristin, can you give everybody a setup for just kind of tell everybody about the story? Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, this is a novel that is really designed to shine a light on the female nurses who went to serve in the Vietnam War. And it's a story that, like many of my stories for the last few years, is about a time in history where women's contributions have been forgotten or overlooked. And so the story is, I take a very naive 21-year-old California girl who's just become a nurse, and she follows her brother to Vietnam, thinking that her service is a way to give back. She was raised in a family that was very proud of their World War II and World War I family service. And so she assumes that, her parents and her community will be proud of her service. And so off she goes, and she is completely unprepared for war. She's unprepared as a nurse, as a woman, as a human being, to be thrown into this firestorm. And so, she really, I think, comes of age and becomes this amazing nurse, and has these friendships with other nurses that will sort of last the whole of her life and define her. And ultimately, she comes home to an America that is incredibly divided and very angry about the war, and nobody wants to talk about her service or show gratitude for it. And she is dealing with obviously undiagnosed, untreated PTSD, and trying to get help with that. And all of the Vietnam era vets had that problem, but the women even more so, because they were another layer of invisible.
Right.
And not even, I mean, I was like shocked when I reading, and then in your acknowledgments, that our government didn't acknowledge that there were women in the Vietnam War, and over 10,000 served. That's just astonishing.
And that she tried to join the Navy and the Air Force before, and they wouldn't take women. And the Army ultimately said, "Get on this plane tomorrow. We'll take you." That blew me away.
The other branches would take her.
Oh, but not.
They just wanted her to have some experience before.
Yes, you're right.
They sent her to war, right? So it was the Army who said, "Sure, you've never really worked in a hospital. Go ahead.
Go.
It'll be great."
I mean, you must have, Kristin, talked to. I mean, I read that you did talk to some nurses that served over there. I mean, because you really feel like you're there. Mm-hmm. You really feel like you're there. I mean, the trauma.
I love Frankie. I love her.
I love her girlfriends, Barb and
Yes.
Ethel. I mean, and I love Jamie and Rye. We love Rye. But it's just, you feel like you're there. It really, you're so wonderful in crafting these really rich characters that we can somehow empathize with, cheer on, be worried about, and at the same time, this is a brutal story,
It is. I mean, it's tough, and it was tough to put Frankie through everything that she went through, honestly, because I adored her. She's probably my favorite heroine ever, and I just wanted her to be okay, to be happy, to be in love, to have all the things she wanted. But once I started doing the research and I was talking to these nurses, who, by the way, I was with them in Washington, D.C. for the 30th anniversary of the Women's Vietnam Memorial, which was founded by a nurse who served over there, Diane Carlson Evans. And I mean, I just felt it would not be fair to these women who had endured so much and who had proven to be so remarkably strong, and yet had also had to deal, like we said earlier, in the shadows with the brokenness that they felt coming home, from war. And so it just felt like I really had to show what it was like for this generation of veterans.
And even, one of the things, I mean, you always tell an epic story, but I like, because the story kind of starts, we're still in the mindset of it's the late 50s, early 60s. We don't really know what Vietnam is. The people are being lied to. Maybe people in the power were lying to themselves, but you really set up the stage of showing where we went from kind of the Eisenhower, and then going into this Vietnam, and how society changed on every level.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that was so interesting for Frankie and these veterans, because she goes over, she does a 2-year, tour of duty, and she kind of, it feels to her like she leaves in a 1950s world and returns to, the summer of love and the hippies and the protests, and nothing feels the same to her. And that's how fast the world was changing there. And as you point out, this was the moment, this Vietnam question was when Americans began to understand that their government would be and could be lying to them about something as important that was causing, the death of Americans. And, I put in the book, there's this moment where I think is a real watershed moment in the era where Walter Cronkite in the middle of the broadcast says, what in the world is going on? And that's the moment when everyone starts saying, well, what's going on with this war?
Right.
And so what happened, I think, is in Americans, anger about this war, they stopped respecting the warriors and the soldiers. And, I hope that is one lesson that we have learned.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that would never happen again.
Yeah.
It was really, because we, from a historical fiction standpoint, we have read a lot of books, and you've written one on World War II and how women served and women, did all these different things. Even in World War I, we've had books. We've never had one about Vietnam. It's so moving, Kristin. We do have to take a quick break, but we're lucky enough to keep you for 2 segments today. If you're just joining us, we are with our hero, and we're such huge fans. Kristin Hannah is with us. Her latest book, The Women. I'm telling you, everyone's going to read it.
Yeah.
And we're so delighted to have you with us. We'll hang out. We'll be right back. It's Lori and Julia on My Talk. All right, we can't wait. We got to come back. Apparently our mics were on during the whole commercial break or something. Kristin, did you hear all of our questions we were going to ask you?
I did not hear any of that, so we're good.
Good. My friend texted me from the car. She goes, we can hear you. What you're thinking, and what we were thinking is, what does this feel like to you? I mean, this book is touted as bigger than life. I mean,
a million copies.
You're going to sell
printed. Warner Brothers has optioned, snapped it up. The book isn't even out yet.
What does it feel like to have written such an amazing book and telling this story?
You know what's different about this? I mean, obviously, I've been doing this a long time.
Yes.
This is like my 20-something.
You're very good at it, by the way.
Thank
Kristin
you.
Hannah, if you're just joining us.
Hopefully, I'm getting better as I'm getting older. But what's really amazing about this book is just the whole speaking to and speaking about and shining a light on the veterans service. That's what feels really different about this book. It feels like it's time for this story to be told, like people are ready to hear it. We have whole generations who don't know anything about the Vietnam era because it wasn't taught in school. It wasn't, it wasn't written about a lot, especially from the female perspective. So I just feel really proud to be able to bring this story to light and to shine a light on the service of this generation, and hopefully teach something along the way.
In a delightful way, reading a novel.
Exactly.
In a delightful way, like you always write these really wonderful stories about women. And the book is called The Women. If you're just joining us, Kristin Hannah, best-selling authors with us. Lori, you had a question?
Well, I did, because you always do. It's still one of our favorite books. We keep wondering when the Fanning girls are going to get the Nightingale made. But one of the things that makes reading your book so rich is that you do meticulous research to give the story, the honesty, the everything that, you feel like you're in that story. I'm wondering, what were the maybe 2 or 3 compelling things that you found out in researching this book about women in Vietnam, or just Vietnam in general?
It was a fascinating book to research, and absolutely terrifying, because I knew, of course, that there would be people reading this book who had been there, and not just a couple here or there like World War II, or the Dust Bowl, that there would be big numbers of people who would know if I was right or wrong. And I felt such a deep obligation, to try to get it right. And I had a lot of help along the way. But one of the things that was most interesting to me in terms of the research was I kept reading when I got to the nurses' memoirs, which were amazing. And I've listed them in the back of the book because I think, people may want to read more about this.
Yes.
But all of these memoirs kept saying, or most of these memoirs kept saying, that at some point these nurses would either try to get help or show up someplace, and they would be told that there had been no women in Vietnam. And as I was doing my researching, I kept thinking that simply cannot be possible. It has to be, an exaggeration, because don't we all know that women have been at war, since the Civil War? That, we know that there are nurses at war. We've seen MASH. We know there's China Beach. So
Right.
Yeah.
I think they must have known. And yet when I actually spoke to the nurses and, talked to them about their experiences, almost everyone I met could remember the moment, both that they were treated badly upon coming home, usually in the airport, and the moment when they were told there were no women in Vietnam by people who ought to know better.
Wow.
That's just that blows you away in the story too, because you can feel Frankie just like, what?
Yeah.
Don't you know what I just went through? I mean, come on. If you're just joining us, we have to say it a lot, Kristin, because people are tuning in. The Women is the best book we think of 2024, and Kristin Hannah, you're just one of the best authors. We are so honored that you're on with us. I found some kind of silly questions, but I just kind of intrigued me a little bit. But how do you come up with the names of your characters?
It's the strangest thing, naming, because it seems like it's not important. And yet I have discovered that it is crucial. And I have tried to write books where the names didn't work somehow. And then I have to start over at some point. It all falls apart. This particular one, I came up with, Francis being called Frankie very early on. And I really struggled with it. I really fought it. It was like, that wasn't a name that made sense to me. So I tried 15 other names along the way. And ultimately, she just kept saying, I'm Frankie, and you just better get on board.
Because we kind of have never asked that, because it always just, it's there. And so you don't think about it. But that's interesting. Do you have, because we know that this was already sold to Warner Brothers, your book, do you have a preference? Because I loved Firefly Lane. I love that. And it's on Netflix, I loved it. And we are waiting for the Nightingale. We heard rumblings that it'll come out this year with the Fanning sisters. True fact?
Well, we had it. Everything was going in place. We were about 2 weeks from filming in Europe in March of 20. And so it got shut down, and then it started up again, and then it was the writer's strike.
Yes.
And it was the actor's strike. So I keep saying I'm an eternal optimist, but I truly believe that 2024 is the year that we will film The Nightingale.
Yay.
Okay. So we've got, everything seems to be in place. So fingers crossed.
Do you have a preference, Kristin, if The Women is a limited series or if it's a movie?
I don't actually. I'm a big TV fan. Warner Brothers is going towards the big screen.
Oh,
and
okay.
What I like about that is women at war is not something that traditionally Hollywood wants to spend a lot of money on and wants to make a big production of. And so it feels very meaningful to me that they really see this as a big, important film.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be so good.
I like that. And also, because we have had, how many movies and books have we had about Vietnam through the eyes of men who served? Right. I mean, hundreds. And we had China Beach, a TV series for people, if you're old enough. But I mean, that's it. Yeah. We have this very untold story. And here you've given Hollywood the epic treatment, and all they need to do is write the screenplay. Damn it.
That's exactly how I feel. And on top of that, how many times have we seen, sort of male camaraderie during war?
Yeah.
And so this idea of showing, I really think the beating heart of this novel is the friendship between these three women.
Yes.
Who wouldn't even have been friends probably if not for the war.
Right.
And so I just love that this idea, this book really, it's a classic kind of war story.
It is.
It is just driven by the women. And
Ah,
I think it's time.
I do
we're
too.
big fans, and I just want to reiterate to people, the book isn't out yet. This would be amazing book club book.
Oh, for
We've
sure.
talked about it so much around the office. The book is The Women by Kristin Hannah. It is compelling, interesting, moving. You can't put it down.
Yeah.
It does everything a book should do, and I loved reading it. You know, some books you like to listen to, some books you like to read. This I loved reading.
Yeah.
This book. It's just
Well,
yummy.
Thank you.
Here's-
Thank you. And I will say, if you like listening, Julia Whalen does the audio of this book, and she knocks it out of the park. So I think
Good.
either format, it's just a really good story. And I say that as an author who knows that they're not all really great
Right.
stories.
Yeah.
You know?
You know, the one I still want to be seeing on the big screen is The Great Alone.
Me too.
Oh, I did listen to that book on the way. Remember, I was driving to Montana. I
Yes.
drove to Montana. I didn't want to even stop and get gas. It's a 16-hour
Yeah.
drive, Kristen. And I'm like, and then finally I called Lori, and I'm like,
Yeah.
sobbing. I'm like, Lori, tell me what's going to happen. And she's like, I'm not telling you.
Well, I think that
That's
people in February, no, you are looking for books to bring on vacation right
Or
now.
just-
And the
oh.
women, like, this is your book to just bring. You just will only then need to bring this book. You're set. You're done.
I guess I would just say, be cautious about reading it on public transportation because you may be crying next to somebody.
Yeah, I know.
This
that's
is so true. You're so right. So, Kristen, do you like, we have to ask you this, do you have a last great book of another author that you've read recently?
Oh, you know what? I have loved the Heaven and Earth bookstore and All the Sinners Bleed. Those are my two favorites recently. And I've just started Chris Whitaker's All the Colors of the Dark.
Okay.
I loved his first book.
Okay, we love you, Kristin Hannah. Love you, love you. Thank you, thank you. We love Kim Dower too, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
She's
Yeah,
a
thank you,
beautiful
Kristen.
woman. We love her.
She
Thank
is.
you.
She's amazing.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
you guys. I'll see you next time.
Yeah, you
Okay,
will.
bye.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye-bye.